Hi, I'm Dahlia, and I was fired by my own brother-in-law from the company my father built and I helped grow. They said I was too expensive, too complicated, too visible, but they didn't just remove me, they erased me. The office I led for 12 years? Gone. My name? Struck from the board. Now? He's calling NONSTOP, begging for help with the very deal he claimed was his idea. Why? Because the system he hijacked was built on my back, and when I stopped showing up, it started to fall. What kind of family does that to you? And how do you fight back without becoming like them? No one can make you feel inferior without your consent. That quote had been taped to my monitor for years. Half reminder, half shield. On the rooftop of Greaves Holdings's Dallas headquarters that evening, it echoed in my mind louder than the band playing in the corner. The air was unseasonably warm for late September, the skyline glowing behind the crowd of executives, board members, and smiling faces I had worked alongside, or above, for the better part of a decade. Champagne flowed, LED screens looped company milestones, and slick video reels introduced next-gen visionaries. My fingers clenched the bass of the flute tighter than they should have. I was still waiting to be called up. My team and I had spent months preparing the merger strategy that would be announced tonight. My name was printed on those early drafts. I had reviewed every decimal, but as each title flashed across the screen and name after name was called out, none of them mine, I felt my stomach twist. Then it came. Please welcome our new chief executive visionary, Calvin Holcomb. The applause around me felt far away, like I ducked underwater. Calvin stepped forward, all charm and teeth, kissing Vera's cheek before taking the mic. My sister stood beside him in a fitted navy dress, nodding proudly like this had been the plan all along. Maybe it had. I caught my father's eye across the crowd. Harold Greaves, founder, patriarch. He raised his glass toward me, smile tight. But he didn't move, didn't come over, didn't explain. I forced my face into a polite expression as Calvin launched into vague buzzwords about agile realignment and leadership that disrupts the past. My slides, carefully built to showcase the financial backbone behind the merger, were nowhere in sight. Afterward, when I tried to ask about it, Vera just smiled and said, "You looked like you needed a break. You've been so stressed lately." I remembered the first time my dad brought me into that boardroom, 24 and fresh out of Wharton, still believing I had to earn my way like anyone else. Texas was no place for loud ambition from women. I learned early, don't demand the mic. Design the spreadsheet no one can argue with. Maybe I'd been foolish to think merit was enough. Monday morning, I sat at my desk before sunrise, as usual, opened the company banking system to finalize fund transfers tied to vendor contracts from the merger rollout. My credentials didn't work. I tried again. Still nothing. "System error," I muttered, then dialed IT. The guy on the line sounded uncomfortable before I even finished explaining. "Hi, Ms. Sorensen. There's been an update to the access protocol. All executive financial actions now require dual approval." I blinked. "Since when?" "Friday, dual authority with Mr. Holcomb." I sat still for a moment, my hands hovering over the keyboard. "I wasn't notified." "I assumed you'd been briefed," he said. "Sorry." I ended the call and stared at the login screen. So it was real. Calvin had been handed co-signature over financial operations, my division, my job. That afternoon, Monica, my assistant, hesitated at my door. "Is the strategy call still on?" I asked, checking the time. They rescheduled it." "They rescheduled it?" Monica winced. "Calvin's team said they're consolidating meeting flows to minimize overlap." I leaned back in my chair. "And I assume I'm now overlap." She didn't answer, just nodded and backed out of the office. Later, as I passed the break room, I caught Calvin's voice. "Efficient systems don't need too many gatekeepers." Laughter followed. I didn't stop walking. That night, I went home, poured myself 2 fingers of bourbon, and sat on the edge of my couch staring at the wall. On the bookshelf, just above my framed Wharton diploma, sat a plaque my father gave me 10 years ago. "You're not here because you're my daughter. You're here because you're the best." Apparently, I was no longer either. The bourbon burned going down, but it wasn't enough to drown the growing knot in my chest. I'd been pushed aside, subtly, professionally, and with the kind of politeness that doesn't leave bruises, but leaves no doubt you've been hurt. I was brushing my teeth before bed when my phone buzzed. A Slack message from a former analyst popped up. "Check the latest org chart update. You're not going to like it." I dried my hands, sat on the edge of my bed, and opened the PDF attachment. The structure had changed. Calvin's division now absorbed mine. My name, once printed on 3 major reporting lines, was gone. No dotted lines, no footnotes, just gone. The moment I saw my name missing from the org chart, I knew it wasn't a mistake. It was a message, and it didn't whisper, it shouted. There's a saying down south that I hadn't thought about in years. Don't let the door hit you where the good Lord split you. That's what it felt like someone had opened the door behind my back, smiled to my face, and slammed it shut once I stepped out. But I wasn't gone yet. That Tuesday, I texted Jordan, a junior analyst I'd mentored since he joined the company out of undergrad. Smart kid. Quiet. Loyal. He owed me nothing, but I asked anyway, "Can you get me a copy of last week's board presentation deck?" It took 3 hours. No explanation. Just a Dropbox link with no subject line. When I opened the file, I stared for several minutes before I could process what I was seeing. There, in big, bold font on slide 9, was a bullet point under the title, Strategic Realignment. Legacy overhead, not agile. My name wasn't even printed, but it didn't need to be. Everyone in that room knew who they were referring to. I was the only executive whose photo wasn't featured in the future-proof vision lineup. Calvin's smiling face dominated 3 slides, backed by sound bites about lean operations and data-driven leadership. Under the Holcomb model, my entire department was absorbed, labeled as duplicative and cost-heavy. I didn't shake, I didn't cry, but my jaw locked and my fingers curled so tightly around the mouse that I had to peel them loose. By Thursday, I'd stopped asking questions. I waited. The invitation came just after lunch. An executive strategy sync at 3 p.m. No agenda, no prep materials. Monica glanced at me like she wanted to say something, but didn't. I showed up 2 minutes early. Calvin was already seated, laptop open. Vera was beside him. Not dressed for business, dressed like she was headed to a donor gala. Her expression was unreadable, more statue than sister. "Thanks for making time, Dahlia," Calvin said, gesturing to the chair across from him, like this was a friendly chat. I didn't respond, just sat. He clicked through slides without flourish. Numbers, charts, more slides. "As we move toward an IPO-friendly structure," he said, "we've identified efficiencies that could be captured by realigning legacy roles." I tilted my head. "You mean eliminating?" He gave a tight smile. 2 junior strategists could cover the current financial oversight scope at 60% of cost. And with 40% of the capability. Vera flinched slightly. Calvin didn't. "Nothing personal," he said, sliding a manila envelope toward me. "Just business. The board approved a severance package we think is fair. 5 months, continued benefits, NDA included." I didn't touch the envelope. "This isn't a discussion, is it?" I asked, keeping my tone even. He closed his laptop. "The decision's been finalized. We appreciate your years of service." Vera finally spoke, quietly. "You've always been the best with numbers, Dahlia. But sometimes, change requires a different kind of leadership." She didn't look at me. Not really. Just somewhere past my shoulder. I stood slowly. "No questions?" "None," Calvin said. I left the envelope on the table. Outside the conference room, the hallway felt longer than usual. Empty. The kind of silence that didn't come from respect, but avoidance. Averted eyes. Half-hearted nods. No one said a word. Monica stood by my desk with a paper coffee cup in her hand. She looked like she might cry. Instead, she whispered, "I didn't know, Dahlia, I swear. They said I'd be looped in later." I nodded once and walked past her. I didn't blame her. She was still playing the game. I was no longer on the board. I drove home in silence. No music, no calls. Just the low hum of Dallas traffic as the afternoon sun dipped toward evening. "How long had this been planned?" I whispered to no one. I parked in my driveway, sat in the car for 5 minutes before going inside. On the kitchen counter, I poured myself a glass of water, then switched to bourbon halfway through. I opened my laptop and typed into the search bar, "What happens when a founder's daughter is fired?" The results weren't helpful. I stared at my ceiling long after the sun set. My mind ran through every meeting, every small shift I hadn't seen clearly. Until now. Greaves Holdings wasn't just phasing me out. They had rewritten the script, recast the lead, and hoped I'd exit quietly before the final act. But the story wasn't finished. Not by a long shot. A notification blinked on my screen. Slack. Anonymous. "They prepared your exit 2 months ago. Ask it about the July admin access change." I had a feeling, but I didn't realize they started digging my grave that far back. They didn't just remove me. They erased me. And it hadn't started the day I was handed that manila envelope. It had started months ago. I kept staring at that Slack message. "They prepared your exit 2 months ago. Ask IT about the July admin access change." My jaw clenched. The memory of being locked out of the finance system had felt wrong then. Now it felt surgical. Warren Buffett once said, "It takes 20 years to build a reputation and 5 minutes to ruin it." I had built mine from scratch, stone by stone, with the sweat equity of every all-nighter, every vendor negotiation, every tough call when no one else would speak up. And now they were rewriting my legacy like it had been a placeholder in a PowerPoint deck. I called Jonah, one of my former analysts, someone I'd personally recruited out of Rice. It rang twice before he picked up, his voice careful. "Dahlia?" "Off record," I said. "I need to know when Calvin started pitching his new structure." Jonah didn't respond right away. Then, "You didn't hear this from me, but June. They started building slides in June. Calvin told one of the product guys, 'We need someone who fits the IPO vision.' Your name wasn't even in the top 5. I exhaled through my nose. So it wasn't cost, it was convenience. He didn't want pushback. You didn't roll over, Jonah added, apologetic. "Thanks," I said, voice flat. "Don't get yourself in trouble." I hung up and sat back, arms crossed. My mind flicked to a meeting in early June, one I should have paid more attention to. It had been a pitch review for investor prep. Calvin had floated a suggestion, cut the internal audit department, said we could outsource compliance and make the margins look leaner. I had pushed back, hard. "That's how you get fined by the SEC, I told him. "That's how companies rot from the inside." He didn't argue, just smiled that politician's smile and said, "Noted." Apparently, it had been noted. The next morning, I opened the severance packet. Not because I planned to accept it, but because I needed to know what they thought they were offering in exchange for my silence. 5 months salary, health coverage, a 12-month non-compete, and an NDA that might as well have been tattooed across my face. Do not speak. Do not exist. Tucked inside was a handwritten note on Calvin's stationery. "Parting with dignity is rare. You can set an example here." I laughed, sharp and bitter. "Dignity or disappearance?" I muttered. The office memo came out that afternoon. "Effective immediately, we are realigning strategic operations to reflect our evolving market strategy and preparing for the next phase of Greaves Holdings' growth journey." No mention of me. Not a name, not a thank you. Not a single sentence acknowledging that I'd spent 12 years of my life building the systems they now claimed as forward-thinking innovation. My phone buzzed like it was morning. Texts trickled in from people who wouldn't say much, because they couldn't. "Thinking of you. Let me know if you want to grab lunch." This whole thing feels weird, Weird. That was the word people used when they were too scared to say wrong. That evening, I received a text from Aaron in marketing. This was just shown at the all hands. Thought you should see it. It was a single slide, a chart. One side, 2 associate-level strategists, 185K combined. Other side, Dahlia Sorensen, 265K total comp. Underneath, opportunity to optimize. At the bottom, a grayscale photo of me, barely visible, faded out like an afterthought. I stared at the screen for a full minute. Then I deleted the image. Not because I wanted to forget, but because I wouldn't give it the honor of permanence. That night, I poured myself a cup of coffee instead of bourbon. Something about bitterness felt more fitting than comfort. I sat on the couch, scrolling through emails that no longer required my approval. Then my phone buzzed again. Unknown number. Just a first name on the screen. Dad. I stared at it until the screen dimmed, then reopened it. Can we talk? It's not what you think. Not what I think? I didn't need him to explain. I needed to know why he never stood up. I didn't call him back. After the message, can we talk? It's not what you think. I stared at the screen for a long time. And then I did nothing. Silence felt appropriate, deserved. Instead, I waited. Sunday morning rolled around, the old family brunch hour. A tradition Vera insisted on, once upon a time, with lemon scones and fresh berries and passive-aggressive digs served over scrambled eggs. I pulled into my parents' driveway just before 10. No invitation, no warning, just me, in jeans and an old Tulane sweatshirt, showing up like the daughter they forgot they had. The house hadn't changed. Same beige brick, same ceramic turtle by the front steps. I found Dad in the backyard, crouched in the garden bed, like always, wearing the same sun hat he'd had since I was a teenager. He looked up, startled. Dahlia! He stood, brushing dirt from his hands. Didn't expect you. I didn't smile. You texted, said you wanted to talk. He nodded and gestured toward the patio chairs. I followed. We sat. Wind rustled the oak leaves above us, loud in the quiet. I waited, giving him a chance to say something first. He didn't. Finally, I asked, "Did you agree with Calvin?" He blinked, like he hadn't expected the directness. I thought it was best to let the board handle things. That's not what I asked, he sighed. He has a plan, and he's persuasive. I turned to him. You used to tell people I knew this company better than anyone, including you. He winced. You do? You did. So why'd you stay quiet? He didn't answer. I looked away, jaw tightening. I didn't need protection. I needed backup. There's a difference. He nodded slowly, eyes on his boots. I made mistakes. No, you made choices. The silence sat heavy between us. A silence that, once upon a time, meant respect. Now it meant absence. On the drive home, I tried to remember the last time I actually felt proud of that family name, or felt it protected me. Too long. The city blurred past my windows as I pulled onto the highway and headed toward White Rock Lake. No music, just thoughts that refused to quiet down. I parked near the east dock, killed the engine, and let my head fall back against the seat. They hadn't fired me. Not really, they erased me, strategically, coldly, and Dad just let them. I pulled out my phone, thumb hovering over the voicemail app. I had half a speech forming in my head. How disappointed I was, how small he'd made me feel, how I would have stood for him, no matter what. But I never hit record. Instead, I whispered, "They didn't fire me. You let me go." I didn't cry. Not this time. I was too tired for grief. Only resolve remained. When I got back to my apartment, I found a message from Clara, an old colleague in HR. No greeting, just a forwarded attachment. A PDF slide deck titled Investor Relations Update, October. I opened it, expecting more spin. There it was, the same cost-cutting slide from before. My salary lined up beside the word excess. My department labeled legacy roles. A new phrase had been added: realigned to ensure capital efficiency. 12 years of innovation, team building, and financial foresight, reduced to a bullet point. A cost line. I deleted the file, then took out the trash. Let them have their slides. Let them chase their IPO without the one person who'd ever kept their chaos in order. Later that evening, I finally turned my phone back on. A dozen missed calls. 2 voicemails I ignored. But what stopped me cold was a calendar alert that pinged as I set the phone down. Vera and Calvin's wedding anniversary dinner. RSVP by Monday. I blinked at it. Nobody had called. Nobody had asked. But apparently, my presence was expected. Family invitations don't always mean you're welcome. Sometimes they're just formalities in a power play. I stared at the subject line for a solid minute. Vera and Calvin's 7th anniversary, celebration dinner, RSVP. There was no, hope you can join, no, let us know if you're free. Just a calendar block and a note that seating had been arranged. It was signed by Vera's executive assistant, not even Vera herself. It felt less like an invitation and more like a summons. For 2 days, I ignored it. I debated deleting it. I told myself I had nothing to prove, especially not to people who had made a show of pushing me out. But late Friday night, I remembered something an old mentor once told me over bourbon and brisket. Sometimes the most powerful thing you can do is take your seat, even when they try to move the table. So I SVP'd yes. Sunday evening, I pulled into the valet line outside a high-end restaurant in Highland Park, the kind of place that served oysters the size of your palm and charged extra for parking validation. I wore a dark green pantsuit, not flashy, not submissive, a statement without saying a word. The host walked me to the back room. It was crowded with familiar faces, board members, former colleagues, family friends, who now looked at me like I was a walking HR liability. Vera saw me first. She approached with a practiced smile and that stiff hug that makes contact but never connection. "I'm glad you could come," she said, voice syrupy. I smiled back. "Of course, wouldn't miss it." Calvin followed behind her, drink already in hand. "Means a lot, really," he said, resting a hand on my shoulder longer than necessary. "I'm sure it does," I replied, stepping just slightly away. The room buzzed with small talk, laughter, clinks of glassware. I took a seat near the edge of the long table, not at the center, not tucked away either. I didn't eat much, just sipped my wine, responded politely, nodded when spoken to. Halfway through the dinner, Calvin stood to give his toast. 7 years, he began, of building not just a marriage, but a vision, a future. Vera rose to join him. She clasped his hand and smiled at the room. "I'm so grateful to have a husband who knows how to lead and how to surround himself with the right people, not just loyal ones." She let that land. A few guests chuckled awkwardly. I felt eyes flick toward me. Calvin raised his glass. He didn't blink. I sat there, spine straight, expression unmoved. I raised my glass too, but I didn't drink. When I finally excused myself, I didn't make a scene. I didn't mutter a word. I simply stood, smoothed the front of my jacket, and walked to Vera's end of the table. I handed her a slim, leather-bound book. Legacy, the story of Greaves Holdings, the one our father had signed and given us both years ago. She looked at it like it was a foreign object. "You left this behind," I said, then turned and left the room. I didn't cry in the car. I didn't scream. I drove home in silence, the same way I'd arrived. At 11:07 p.m., my phone buzzed with a voicemail. It was my mother. Her voice was flat, professional. "I hope you're not planning anything disruptive. This family has a public image to protect. When even your silence is labeled a threat, you know you've become someone they fear." I played my mother's voicemail 3 times. Not because I needed to hear her words again. They were as sterile as an HR memo, but because I couldn't stop dissecting her tone. Cold, controlled, almost bored. "I hope you're not planning anything disruptive." This family has a public image to protect. Family, image. Two words that had never felt so divorced from each other. Maya Angelou once said, "When people show you who they are, believe them." Well, I believed her now. On Tuesday morning, I got a message from Alex, one of the few HR folks I still trusted. He didn't say much, just sent me a file with the subject line, FYI, confidential. It was a redacted internal report, dated 2 weeks before my so-called strategy meeting. Anonymous submission. The accusation? Potential financial misconduct and inappropriate autonomy in decision-making. No specifics, just enough to cast a long shadow. But the sender metadata wasn't fully scrubbed. A trace remained. I knew the name attached to the original account. Calvin's executive assistant. I'd trained her, hired her myself. So not only was I fired, I was framed first. Set up to be discredited if I pushed back too hard. I sat at my kitchen island, the document open on my laptop, fingers resting on the rim of my coffee mug. Rage didn't even rise this time. It was something colder, something cleaner. By Thursday, I decided to return to the office to collect the rest of my belongings. The receptionist barely looked up when I entered. No badge check, no greeting, just a nod toward HR. My office, once the corner suite with the skyline view, was gone. Repainted, furniture removed, no nameplate on the wall. Just empty walls and that hollow quiet that follows a hasty rebrand. The receptionist handed me a box. Standard cardboard, no labels. Inside were a few loose notebooks, a pen set, and the plant that used to sit on my windowsill, now brown and withered. "This was left with HR," she said, without a hint of apology. I carried it out in silence. One box. 12 years. Back home, I opened LinkedIn. The first thing I saw was a post from the official Greaves Holdings account, celebrating agile transformation, a new era for strategic leadership. It featured a photo of Calvin, arms crossed in front of the building, grinning like a man who had just won the lottery and inherited the dealership. My inbox was flooded with reactions. One stood out. From Talia, a former intern who had gone on to run marketing for a regional bank. "Why didn't they even say goodbye? You were the heart of that place." Because hearts are easy to transplant when people pretend the body never needed one. The next morning, I met with Daniel, a mentor, a former CFO turned advisor to early-stage founders. He listened without interrupting as I explained everything. He didn't flinch when I showed him the cost-cutting slide, the false ethics complaint, the NDA clause. "You don't owe them silence," he finally said. "You owe yourself closure. There's a difference." We finished our coffees in comfortable silence. Then he pulled out his notebook. "Write down every client you've brought to that firm. Not the ones they handed you, the ones you earned. Start there." Back home that evening, I took his advice. I sat on the floor of my living room with old notebooks, email chains, and CRM exports I'd saved because I knew one day they'd try to forget. I filled a legal pad front to back with names. People who signed with Greaves because they trusted me. Not Calvin, not Vera. Me. And one name in particular stopped me. Bryce Tilden, CEO of Black Mirror Manufacturing, our biggest account when I was still there. He'd called me personally after we landed the contract, said he hadn't trusted anyone in suits since 2009 until he met me. I grabbed my laptop, opened LinkedIn, and typed his name. There he was. Still at Black Mirror. Still wearing that same navy blazer in his headshot. I clicked message and wrote, "Curious if your contract renewal came with a tech migration plan." I wasn't going back, but I wasn't walking away empty-handed either. It started with a text from Monica. "We've been watching what's happening. You weren't the only one they sidelined." For a moment, I thought it was pity, but as I read it again, I realized it wasn't sympathy. It was something sharper, aligned. Quiet solidarity from people who had been forced into silence just like me. We met 2 days later, not at some high-profile spot downtown, but in a modest co-working space off Mockingbird Lane. No logos on the door, just a password to get in. Monica was waiting with 3 other women, Cynthia from accounting, Helena from logistics, and Kelsey from investor relations. Each of them had once held key roles, each pushed aside when their expertise became inconvenient. They didn't greet me with fanfare or apologies, just a nod and space at the table. I kept my mouth shut when they eliminated procurement oversight, Helena said, folding her arms. Told myself it was temporary, but when I saw what they did to you, I realized it wasn't about strategy. It was about control. Cynthia tapped her laptop, opening a shared folder filled with emails, internal memos, calendar screenshots, proof that Calvin had been pruning dissent one realignment at a time. This is what we've gathered, Monica added. Meeting notes, budget changes, decks that were deleted from the archive but recovered through shared caches. They've been rewriting history, one PDF at a time. I scrolled through the files in silence. Dates lined up perfectly with my removal. So did names I hadn't realized were missing until now. Kelsey leaned forward. We call ourselves Legacy Truth. You inspired it, Dahlia. For a few seconds, I didn't know what to say. I'd felt so alone, so defeated. But here, in this low-lit room with folding chairs and a flickering ceiling fan, were women who still believed in what we'd built together, and who weren't afraid to reclaim it. We're not asking you to fix it, Monica said carefully. We're asking if you'll lead the next part. I didn't give them a speech, I just nodded. Start by compiling everything you can tie directly to financial misrepresentation, dates, slides, contract language. Helena raised a brow. You thinking lawsuit? No, I said, leaning back. I'm thinking leverage. As we wrapped the meeting, Kelsey walked with me to the parking lot. Just before we reached my car, she handed me a to-go coffee. From the shop downstairs. I smiled. Thanks. Check under the sleeve, she added. When I did, a small piece of paper fell into my hand. In her handwriting, to the real leader. We still remember who built this. I didn't respond, just gave her a quiet nod, then got in my car. That night, I couldn't sleep. My laptop glowed on the kitchen counter as I sat cross-legged on the floor, surrounded by spreadsheets, Post-its, and a legal pad filled with notes from earlier chapters of my life. I built a new sheet, columns for current clients, terminated accounts, employees reassigned or let go under performance reviews. Every name I entered had a story. Every move Calvin made had a cost. I wasn't chasing revenge. I was building a case, something stronger than emotion, something they couldn't dismiss with a smirk and a severance folder. Near midnight, I opened my inbox again, scanning old client contacts, flagging the ones I knew still trusted me. Then I saw it. Subject: Anderson contract, emergency clause activation, sent 3 days ago. Addressed to me, not Calvin. The contract I secured was burning, and they had no one left who could put out the fire. I read the subject line twice before opening it. Failover tests failed. Critical specs missing. Sent from Anderson's CTO. Not to Greaves Holdings. To me. At my personal email. My thumb hovered over the reply button, but I needed more context before speaking. So I called Marcus. He picked up on the second ring. I was waiting for you to call. You saw the email? I helped write the specs, or tried to, before they started butchering it. His voice dropped. Dahlia, it's a mess. They slashed QA timelines to meet Calvin's presentation deadlines. The infrastructure's unstable, load balancing was never tested, and none of the backups are syncing properly. I didn't say anything, just let him keep going. Calvin's been panicking since last Thursday, but you'd never know it. He walks around with that country club calm like everything's fine. I could picture it. Calvin leaning on the edge of someone else's desk, tossing buzzwords like candy while the system burned behind him. I'm guessing Anderson isn't staying quiet, I said. Nope. Their CTO told us flat out, if you're not brought back in, they're pulling the deal. I hung up and opened the project files I had archived on an external drive. It took me less than 15 minutes to find the original architecture diagrams Calvin had tried to adapt. He'd reversed the load-sharing hierarchy and shifted the node structure to appear more streamlined. On paper. In reality, it made the entire platform brittle. One glitch, and the whole system would crash. Which it had. Anderson's investor demo had been a disaster. I knew that from a quiet LinkedIn message I received from their project manager. You chose cost over expertise. We won't. By noon, my phone lit up again. This time with a link. A video. Internal footage. Leaked. In it, Calvin stood at the front of a boardroom, polished as ever, a screen behind him flashing buzzwords in blue and white. My strategic pitch, he said, is what landed Anderson. The tech team just executed. 30 seconds of smug credit grabbing, followed by silence. Then the comments started. Wasn't this Dahlia Sorensen's project? He didn't even understand the system specs. Calvin doesn't even know what failover means. And then came the slides. Posted anonymously, but I knew the source. Legacy Truth. Side-by-side screenshots. My original designs next to Calvin's edits. Highlighted errors. Timestamps. Metadata. There it was. Truth with a digital paper trail. Within hours, Greaves Holdings went into panic mode. I received a call from a friend inside PR. They're trying to scrub the video, she said, but it's already on Reddit, LinkedIn, and a few industry forums. 2 board members have demanded an emergency review. I didn't gloat, not yet. That evening, my phone buzzed again. Vera. Her message was short. This is not how we handle things in this family. I stared at it for a long moment before replying, I'm not in your family. I'm the one you fired. And then I turned off my phone. But it didn't stay off long. That night, as I poured myself a cup of tea, my screen lit up again. Unknown number, no name attached. I let it ring, but something in me said I needed to hear what was on the other side. I picked up on the 4th ring. Delia, my father's voice came through, gravelly and tired. I need to see you. I didn't answer. He exhaled. Things are falling apart. It wasn't just a contract collapse. It was a reckoning. And I wasn't done yet. The restaurant was quiet. Almost too quiet for a Thursday evening. I spotted my father in a back booth, alone, swirling a glass of iced tea like it had scotch in it. His shoulders had always seemed squared, back straight from decades of leadership. But that night, he looked like someone had stolen the air from his lungs and left him standing. He didn't rise when I approached, just gestured to the seat across from him and said, I should have said something sooner. I didn't answer right away. I sat, folded my hands in my lap, and waited for him to keep going. The Anderson deal's gone, he said, cutting straight to it. They pulled out officially this morning. Legal is preparing for what could be a very expensive lawsuit. 2 engineers quit. PR can't contain it. Calvin's under internal review, but he's still pretending we're all in the clear. And you? I asked, voice low. He shook his head slowly. I followed Vera's lead. Thought I was protecting the family, keeping it from fracturing completely. You chose optics over backbone, I said, not bitter, just honest. He didn't disagree. Then he reached into a worn leather briefcase and pulled out a binder. Familiar. Blue cover, edges worn down, a Greaves Holdings seal stamped on the front. He opened it and slid a few pages toward me. Succession memo, dated 5 years ago, signed by him, the board chair, and 2 witnesses. My name was there, Dahlia Sorensen, designated successor to Harold Greaves as CEO upon retirement or incapacitation. I stared at it. This was real. It was. And he handed me another page. Same memo format, same header. New date, 18 months ago. But this time, Calvin's name was printed. Mine wasn't even mentioned. They said you'd lost interest, he said quietly, that you'd disengaged, that you were tired. I stared at the ink, at the tidy signatures beneath it. Gaslighting doesn't always come with raised voices. Sometimes it's a form, a quiet switch, a story rewritten just enough to sound reasonable. You let them erase me from my own future, I said, before I ever had a chance to defend it. "I thought I was keeping the peace," he murmured. "No," I replied. "You kept the silence. They just filled it with their story." Back at home, the viral video was still trending. The clip of Calvin claiming he'd landed Anderson while standing in front of my diagrams had been stitched, dissected, reposted 1,000 times. Comments were brutal and deserved. Legacy Truth wasn't slowing down either. They'd just posted a new carousel of comparison slides, mine versus his. It wasn't even close. One commenter wrote, "She didn't just build the system, she protected it, and they punished her for that." Calvin had gone dark. No new posts, no interviews. Vera's LinkedIn had been locked down since Tuesday. Rumor had it she'd canceled a keynote in Houston citing family medical issues. The public had begun to do what no board meeting ever could: tell the truth, out loud. I was sipping coffee at the kitchen table when a message popped up from a familiar name: Raj Patel, former CEO of one of our partner firms. "You should have been CEO. Want to have coffee next week?" I replied. "Name the place." Later that night, I sat in the dark, a single candle flickering on the counter beside me. In front of me, both succession memos. The original, the replacement. They didn't take my legacy, they just gave me a reason to rebuild it my way. Just after midnight, the doorbell rang. A courier stood outside, envelope in hand. No return address. Inside was a single sheet, a vote tally, board members, names listed, columns, support, reject, abstain. 3 had abstained on the memo that replaced me. 1 had scribbled a note at the bottom in neat blue ink. "If you run, I'll back you." For the first time, it wasn't about proving myself to them. It was about proving I never needed them to begin with. There's a rhythm to staying quiet. When to absorb, when to wait, and when to strike. I had been silent long enough to make them comfortable. Long enough to let them believe the version of the story they crafted in closed-door meetings and investor pitches. But Ruth Bader Ginsburg once said, "Fight for the things you care about, but do it in a way that will lead others to join you." I wasn't done fighting, but now I had a new kind of power. I didn't want Greaves back. I wanted something of my own. So I opened a fresh pitch deck on my laptop, the first I'd built since the day they slid that envelope across the table. Only this time, I wasn't building it for them. I sent a message to Colby Ruiz, a venture capitalist I'd known for over a decade. We met when he was launching his first fund, and I was still convincing men twice my age that financial acumen didn't require a Y chromosome. His reply came 10 minutes later. "I was wondering when you'd call. Come to Austin. I'll clear Thursday." I booked the flight that night. 2 days later, I stepped into a co-working space that overlooked the river. Slides loaded, hair pulled back, no ring, no entourage. Just me. Colby looked up from his tablet, grinned. "You're glowing." "No," I corrected. "I'm ready." I walked him through the Sorensen Strategy Collective, an ethics-first consulting firm designed to serve overlooked founders, women-led firms, and companies navigating integrity crises. Real value, transparent guidance, no shortcuts. He leaned back, nodding. "Dahlia, I've seen pitches from 6 firms trying to do what you're already doing with no funding. I'm in. 2 million. Seed round. We draft docs tomorrow." I hesitated for half a breath, then extended my hand. Let's build what they never could. That night, Legacy Truth dropped something new. Not a takedown, a manifesto. It didn't name names, but the timestamps and attachments told the full story. The title said it all. I wasn't too expensive. I was just too uncompromising. Within hours, the post hit 1.2 million views. Comments flooded in from employees, clients, even former competitors. Dahlia Sorensen didn't walk away. She was pushed, and they lost their spine when they lost her. At Greaves, the panic I'd once only imagined was now real. Investors began pulling out. The IPO timeline was indefinitely paused. Calvin was suspended. Vera's social accounts disappeared like a ghost trail. The board issued a soft, sterile statement. We are conducting a leadership reassessment to align with stakeholder expectations. Translation? Damage control. One comment under the news release stood out. Maybe the real liability was never Dahlia. Maybe it was the arrogance that replaced her. I didn't reply. I didn't need to. The next afternoon, I was back in Dallas, in a glass-walled conference room lit with late sun. My laptop open, slides humming. The logo of my new firm sat in the corner of every page. Sorensen Strategy Collective. Not a name I inherited, a name I built. As I reviewed potential hires, a folder caught my eye. The first resume, Marcus, former lead engineer, my right hand. Attached was a handwritten note. Ready when you are, boss. I smiled. I didn't just leave something behind. I became something they never imagined I could be. It was strange how quiet things had become. After the pitch, after the funding, after the headlines, the world didn't roar. It hushed. I sat in my new office, bare walls, a single box half unpacked, the sound of construction from another unit echoing faintly through the concrete floors. Peaceful, in a way. Michelle Obama's words drifted through my head. When they go low, we go high. But sometimes, we just go. I went, and I wasn't going back. The knock came just after lunch. Vera. She didn't look like the perfectly groomed executive anymore. No makeup, hair pulled back in a lazy twist, blazer wrinkled at the collar. Her face had lost the high-polished shine, replaced by something closer to fatigue than regret. "I won't take much of your time," she said. "You already have," I replied, motioning her in. She stepped inside and didn't sit, just stood by the window, arms crossed. "Calvin's been removed. The IPO is dead. We've lost 3 major clients. The board's in shambles." I waited. "I came to ask if you'd consider a joint statement," she said, "to restore some public faith, something to soften the optics." There it was. Not remorse, reputation management. I tilted my head. "You didn't protect the family, Vera. You managed the optics, and you still are." She flinched, barely. "I made mistakes." "You made calculations," I corrected. Her mouth opened, but nothing came out. She nodded once, turned, and left without another word. 2 hours later, my father showed up. He didn't knock. He buzzed through the building's front door, waited until the receptionist called me. "He says he just wants 5 minutes." I almost said no, but curiosity won. He stepped in slowly, holding a folded newspaper in one hand, and the look of someone aging faster than they meant to. I said nothing as he walked over to my desk and studied the one photo I'd unpacked. Me at 27, speaking on a panel in Chicago, smiling like I still believed the company would always be mine. "I don't expect forgiveness," he said finally, "but I hope you'll let me be proud of what you've done." I didn't smile, but I nodded. He didn't stay. Later that night, a new email notification slid across my screen. LegalO'GreavesHoldings.com. The subject line: Advisory Role Proposal, Transition Support. I didn't open the attachment. Didn't need to. I already knew the pitch. Come back, help us survive, no real power, but enough of your face to soothe the storm. I clicked delete. Then I opened a new message to Colby. Ready to activate Phase 2. Let's move. The next morning, before sunrise, I drove by the original Greaves Holdings building, the one my dad started out of a rented office suite in the late 80s. I parked across the street, stepped out into the cold, and walked up to the front door. I ran my fingers along the old brass door plate, still there, still tarnished. I used to believe this place would be my inheritance, my crown. Now, it felt like a tombstone. They hadn't changed, but I had, and they no longer deserved what I was becoming. As I walked away, my phone buzzed. I pulled it from my coat pocket and glanced at the screen. A new headline from Bloomberg: Former Greaves exec launches new female-led advisory firm, raises $3.2 million seed round. I smiled. I wasn't rebuilding what they broke. I was building what they never had the vision to imagine. The ballroom buzzed with that corporate hum, heels clicking on tile, name tags adjusted on lapels, coffee cups half full, half forgotten. This was the quarterly industry forum in downtown Dallas, and for the first time in over a decade, I wasn't here as someone's daughter of or former something. The banner above the main stage read, "Women Reshaping Finance." And beneath my name, the placard didn't list Greaves Holdings. It read, Dahlia Sorensen, CEO, Sorensen Strategy Collective. Oprah's voice echoed in my mind, "You become what you believe." And I believed I was no longer what they made me. When the panel began, the moderator wasted no time. You might know her from the now viral piece that reignited the national conversation around succession transparency and ethical leadership in family-run companies. I half smiled, not because of the recognition, but because it no longer stung. The applause that followed went on longer than I expected. I scanned the crowd, found Vera and Harold seated near the back. Neither waved, neither spoke. They just watched. I spoke about systems, how good ones are built on accountability, not inheritance. I didn't mention names. I didn't need to. Truth had done the naming for me. After the session, I stepped backstage for a glass of water. That's when I saw her. Linda Ferris, senior board liaison from Greaves. She approached like someone trained in both diplomacy and damage control. "Dahlia," she said, tone neutral. "There's been a shift. Calvin's resigned. Vera will exit by year's end. We're rethinking legacy." I tilted my head, silent. "We'd like to propose a merger. Sorensen as lead. Greaves restructured under your vision. You'd have full authority. Board has approved in principle." I let the silence sit. "I don't merge with systems that erased me," I said. "I outbuild them." She nodded. She knew it was a no before I said it. And she left. Back in the ballroom, the Q&A began. A young woman, early 30s maybe, stood and asked, "What would you say to people like me, who feel invisible inside systems that only reward those who already belong?" I stepped closer to the mic. "You're not there to be seen," I said. "You're there to build something they can't ignore." The room hushed. Then I added, "I wasn't too expensive. I was just unwilling to be discounted." The applause this time didn't just echo. It carried weight. That night, I returned to the office. It wasn't much, just 2 rooms above a cafe. Still smelled like paint and sawdust. But it was mine. I opened the drawer of my desk, placed the original Greaves succession memo inside. Then next to it, a brass plate that read, Dahlia Sorensen, founder. I sat back, letting the desk lamp cast a soft glow across the wood grain. Picked up my phone. Texted Marcus. "Ready for phase 3? He replied in seconds. Just a thumbs-up emoji and a photo of his new desk, our company's name embossed on a mousepad beside it. I smiled. Then the alert came. New message. Subject. Board inquiry. Ethical transition planning. The body read, "We'd like Sorensen Strategy to advise our leadership restructure. You came highly recommended." I clicked reply. I didn't just get justice. I rewrote the legacy, on my terms.